Yes, it's John G. Sutton, Tales from the Jails. I'm going to talk today a little bit again about the documentary that was on TV, because there's been quite a big write-up about it. You may have seen it, about criticising the staff and the regime that pertained in the 70s and 80s, which is when I worked there. And there was the big criticism seems to be the drinking culture and the violence by the staff. Well, the drinking culture was definitely a part of the system, which was fuelled to a certain extent by the presence of the then governor, Norman Brown, who would go into the club at dinner time and join the staff in necking beer or whatever else he got his hands on. And it wasn't just Norman, it was chief officers, principal officers, they're all in there. And of course, some of the staff tended to have one more than was really good for them. Probably 4 or 5 pints at dinner time, which is a bit of going, in an hour. They actually had about an hour and a quarter. But when they got back on the landings and they were reeking of Boddington's Bitter, which was the local brew, because Boddington's Brewery was at the bottom of Southall Street, turn left onto Bury New Road, and it was up there on the left. And it was on draft. It was an absolutely wonderful beer, wonderful at the time. It was brewed at Strangeways Brewery, which was, as I say, about 200 yards away from the jail. And it was delightful, but not at dinner time. It wasn't good for you at dinner time. At dinner time, you've got work to do and you've got to go back there and be responsible. Yes, I think that should be what's taking place, But it was the culture at the time, and it wasn't just Strangeways, it was all over the place. All the prisons had clubs like that, and the staff used to go in at lunchtime, and there was no prohibition on... it wasn't prohibited to go and have beer at lunchtime. It was perfectly acceptable. You'd see the governors in there, the chiefs and all that. It was just what people did. And the same with the police. At Bootle Street Police Station in Manchester, where my brother was, he was working there at the time. He was a detective sergeant or detective inspector at the time. I went in there, and there were the police at the bar in the police club in Bootle Street, boozing away and going out on duty. My brother had one of these blue flashing lights that was magnetised, and he had that in the car. I know it's nothing to be proud about, but he used to put that on the top of his car and zoom round Manchester like he was attending an emergency. Well, he wasn't attending an emergency, he was attending certain pubs. All the CID were doing that. The police were doing that. They were notorious for it. The big change, of course, came in 1982 or 83 with the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. That changed everything. You could no longer just go into a prison cell, a police cell with a suspect and get a confession. It didn't work like that anymore. They had to be fully cautioned and have their rights and have the solicitors present. And the evidence of a boot up the backside, that wasn't accepted anymore. You see, I know that people today will probably not recall, we won't remember this, very few people remember it, but the magistrates' court didn't used to be magistrates' courts. They were called the police courts, and the prosecution was done by a duty inspector. The police inspector would give evidence against the charged, the suspect or the defendant, and the police themselves would prosecute the case that they'd brought. And there were judges there, magistrates, but the courts were known not as the magistrates' courts, but as the police courts. I can still remember them. I've been before the magistrates myself. Speeding offences and stuff like that. I mean, 3 miles an hour over the limit. How dangerous is that, folks? They sent me one once and I sent it back to them with a wanted poster with a picture on the front of it. You know, dangerous man. We must capture him, like a Wild West poster. I never heard any more from that. I mean, I probably won letter of the week. Because these are people who are just human, you know, who are prosecuting you. But there's a thing here. Did you know that police officers do not face traffic offences the same that you and I face? If you're a police officer and you're charged with speeding, you get an admonishment from your duty inspector. You don't get taken before the magistrates and have points attached to your licence and get fined. No. You get a notification from your duty inspector. And I believe you can go up to 50 odd points before you actually get hauled over the coals properly. Imagine that. That's one rule for the police and one rule for you. How's about that then? Right. Okay, the drinking culture at Strangeways. It really did start to get out of hand. I mean, one afternoon I was on duty and it would be about 2:30, 2 o'clock, you know, early in the afternoon. And this hospital officer, senior hospital officer, came on duty and started shouting abuse at me. I'm going to get you, when I get my hands on you, I'm going to break you in half. He was one of these industrial units, you know, about 6'5", something like that. 18, 19 stone, tanked himself up with a load of booze, came back into the prison and started shouting insults at me. I made a formal complaint about him to the governor, but I might as well have made a formal complaint to Mickey Mouse. Make any difference? Yeah, they just did what they want. And so inmates complaining that they were assaulted by drunken staff. Yeah, they would be. I mean, I eventually got assaulted. I got assaulted by one drunken officer who tried to bloody strangle me in the clinic. And I couldn't fight back because there were bottles of Largactil, bottles of Valium, bottles of all sorts of stuff in there in the clinic. You know, we took gallon containers of the stuff. Syringes that I'd drawn up with insulin for the diabetics, all on waiting to be administered. And this maniac grabbed hold of me and started trying to strangle me. It damaged my throat. I had to go to hospital. I was off work for about 3 days, couldn't eat. Maniac. And what do you think the governor did? Nothing. Nothing. Nobody did nothing. Got you complained. I mean, and if that can happen to the staff, what do you think can happen to the inmates? Yeah? You saw that documentary. That's what all this is about, what we're talking about here. The ITV documentary, Strangeways, Britain's most notorious prison. Well, they certainly painted it and make it look like a hellhole. Yeah? So if you've not seen the documentary, I'll put a link to the documentary down here, below this, yeah? So have a look there. And following that, of course, is a link to my book, which you can buy on Amazon, which is about the prisons, the early days, in my early days in the prisons. Starts in January 1975. That's when I joined. Yeah. So, yeah, a big kerfuffle about the drinking culture in the prisons and the brutality of the staff. What happened with the prison club? I mean, they've shut them all down now, which is things. I mean, people say, you've got a chip on your shoulder. Somebody's very kindly said, I've got a chip on my shoulder because you failed to get the union off the ground. It wasn't me that failed. I mean, I succeeded. The union was a registered trade union. What happened was that the Prison Officers Association told everybody I was an agent of Colonel Gaddafi, and I was being paid by a foreign power to disrupt the prison system. And it wasn't just the Prison Officers Association that was saying this. The governors were saying this as well. You know, and I became, they thought I would become something of a pariah. But obviously I just got on with it. But, I wasn't very happy that it didn't succeed. It should have succeeded, because you can't have chief officers running your trade union. You know, it's like having your line managers running your union. You do that. Well, what's the point in that? Yeah, it's good for the government, good for the prison service, yeah, good for the governor, good for the chiefs, but it ain't good for the staff. But you try telling the staff that. Well, no, we trust them, you know. I don't know if you've seen that documentary of Strange Ways, filmed in 1979, screened in 1980, the third episode of the series called Screws. You'll see me in the canteen arguing why we shouldn't have managers running the trade union, and the big fat Fred who sat next to me saying, well, these people have represented me better than I ever expected. No, they haven't. They're representing themselves. And that big fat bastard, he went on to be the chairman of the Prison Officers Association. Tell you, that guy, he would have sold you down the river. He would have sold his granny down the river. Yeah. It's creepy bastards. I'll tell you. I'm out of there now. Been out of there nearly 40 years. Thankfully. And I've survived. Now, the drinking culture, it got out of hand, completely out of hand in strange ways. It ended up with a lot of the staff getting arrested for drunk driving. I mean, the police knew that they were bang at it because they used to go in there as well. So the police knew that there were staff in there drinking, necking it back, and then getting in the cars and driving home. So they started stopping them. Yeah, about 2 or 3 of them got done for drunk driving, and one of them, he got done twice, and he was required to resign because they were going to imprison him for drunk driving. He was that far over the limit. There was one team of louts in there. You see him on that documentary. You have a look. Yeah, the guy with the curly hair who's singing and shouting up and down. They used to have there was a group of them, and they used to grab people and rip all the clothes off and throw them through the fire exit door into Southall Street, which is the street leading up to the old entrance to Strangeways. That's Southall Street. Used to throw them through the fire exit stark naked, and get them have to come round and get back in at the door at the side. And if they ain't got the key, they'd be banging on the door, start bollock naked. I mean, it sounds horrendous, but they did that. One night they grabbed this guy and he's pleading with them, please don't do it, please don't do it. They ripped his clothes off. When they got his kecks down, he was wearing women's underwear, suspenders, and frilly panties. Bloody pervert. Anyway, they ripped them off and out through the fire escape. I thought, I'm getting out of here before it's my turn. They did it to the vicar. They had it wasn't Noel Proctor, the vicar. It was like one of his assistants. They called him the rocking vicar because he was a young man who was like wanted to be one of the boys, you know. He was one of the boys when I saw it. They grabbed hold of him, ripped all his clothes off, naked into the street. These guys had really put in some away. Then they go into the jail at lunchtime and dish it out a bit. Anyway, that's Strange Ways. I highly recommend that you get my book, by the way. It tells a little bit about Strange Ways. Quite a lot, actually. Anyway, I'm now going to sing a song now, so I better warn you all. Here it comes. Here we are. There we are. Get that? That's the song Dinger, folks. And this is a slightly amended song to celebrate the subject of today's little rant. This is I Belong to Strange Ways. I'm sure that you'll recognise the song when I start to sing it. Well, it's not going to be singing, is it? It's a mangling. Let me mangle some for you. I belong to Strange Ways, dear old Strange Ways jail. But there's something the matter with Strange Ways, 'cause it's going round and round. I may be an ordinary working screw, as anyone here can see, But when I've had 10 pints of beer on an afternoon, Strange Ways belongs to me. There you go. I doubt that you enjoyed it, but if you did enjoy that, folks, I will be pleased to see you on the sick parade tomorrow, and we'll see if we can get you some medication. Hey, probably some malargactyl up the jacksie. How about that? See you, folks.